Hello and welcome to Dynasty Degens episode 16. I am Nerd Boy. I'm joined as always by JC Dynasty. JC, how you doing tonight? I missed your J. Sorry, JCJ Dynasty. There's
We're
another
good.
JC out there on Twitter,
Yeah.
and he's always tagging me in trades, and I'm like, "You're not the JC I know, man. I'm not answering this trade question for you." I
I
I always get. Go
I was
ahead.
gonna say that is always weird seeing how he does pop up occasionally. I forget what his handle is, but I always went by JJ for much of my life. I only did the JC because it's not what anyone has referred to me as in real life, and I wanted my Twitter presence to be somewhat secluded from my day-to-day life. So it was funny seeing somebody JC. The only other JC that I was familiar with was JC Romero, like the pitcher from he played for
Yeah.
like Angels and like a couple other teams back in like the early 2000s. So like that was the only other JC that popped into my head when I thought of it. So
Why was JC the choice? Why would you go, I want to be Twitter JC?
my middle name starts with a C, so
Oh,
it was I figured I would go with that as opposed to JJ because I figured JJ was just JJ the jet plane. I've heard it like my entire life and super annoying, but you can't fight the alliteration in your name, I guess though. So that's what I had to go
yeah.
with.
Yeah, speaking of not really knowing, where the Twitter handle comes from, our guest tonight has no idea why his Twitter handle is Hobart Whipple. But we have our very own guy on tonight, and he is going to be launching the Debbie Degens podcast in a couple weeks. So what better way to kind of get that started is to have him on and talk a little C2C, talk about his process, where he came from, how he started all this. How his rankings go, all that good stuff, because I don't know how to rank freshmen in C2C or Devi, or it's like something that I haven't tackled yet. So I'm really interested to touch on this, but let's get to it. Here is our guy, Todd Vincent. What's up, man? How you doing?
Good. How you guys doing?
Good, man.
Well,
We're
good,
doing
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yeah. I was telling you guys about my kid. He fractured his arm today, and he is 1 year old. So a 1 year old with a fractured arm is nothing I didn't think I would ever have to deal with. Like, I'm so gentle with my kid, but it happened at daycare, and like just to get that call and like trying to console a 1 year old it's brutal, man. But he's doing better. The day is good. It's pretty much starting for me now because I've been at the emergency room all day. Um, but let's introduce you, man. JC, you want to get started with the typical questions we usually ask guests?
Yeah, I mean Todd. You contribute over at FF League Winners as well, and you're the head man for the Notre Dame team and the program. I just wanted to ask you, like, how did you get started with? I know you've probably been playing fantasy in general for a while, but how did you initially come up with the premise that you were going to go onto Twitter, and then what ultimately led you to decide, hey, I'm going to jump off this diving board into the content game and put your thoughts out there.
Yeah. So the whole content thing is real new actually. Uh, I basically just given like advice in the like WRL Discord and stuff like that, and it was actually Joe O'Leary who's with Dynasty Nerds. He's the one that referred me to Thomas at League Winners. I didn't put the two together until I joined the group chat with League Winners and I saw his name in there, and it clicked to me because Joe reached out to me through DM on Twitter, asking about like freshman ranking. He had a draft coming up, and he asked me about my like incoming freshman rankings and stuff, and wanted some deeper names. So I gave them to him, and then once I saw his name in there, I'm like, oh, that must be who it was. I had no idea who would refer me to him, and then so Thomas just shot me a DM and asked about doing Debbie content, and I was like, I never even really considered it. I just dig into that stuff for fun and whatever. And then I talked to Kevin Coleman, who everyone knows in the space, and he's like, do it. He's like, what do you got? What do you have to lose? He's like, what's the worst that could happen? I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll do this. When I first got into like the C2C and Debbie space, was with like Campus to Canton guys. I just happened to discover them through YouTube, and and stuff. Just the algorithm, I guess, lined up, and right kind of when they launched, and I just was fascinated with the whole concept right from the start. I didn't do anything with it. I sat back and watched, like, I tuned in on their YouTube videos and asked questions for a good year. Just ask questions on their videos in Discord, just game theory stuff and all that type of stuff before I was even comfortable making any kind of decisions or joining leagues or anything like that on my own. So that's how I kind of got started there. But I've been playing fantasy forever. Like my home league, shout out Sunday School. We have a league that's like 15 plus years with basically the same. We've had a couple stragglers who left right away, but that was my introduction to it. It's like the league that it's the toughest league I'm in. And it's a keeper league, not even full dynasty, nothing. And I joined that with a high school friends who they were putting a league together and they needed someone last minute. So I'm like, whatever. They put me down. I had no clue what I was doing. But yeah, we've had like an in-person draft every single year for 15, 16 plus years now. It's wild. It's just.
I love that, man. We, our home league stopped doing the in-person drafts probably 2018. I want to say, 2018. It was like 2 years before COVID. And we've been dying to get an in-person draft going again. I've been dying to do an in-person draft with you guys. That's like something that I want to get going. I want to get us all together and eventually once we launch off into the stratosphere, like I assume we're going to. I know that we're going to. We'll have those free plane tickets on deck. So, but Todd, I think. So when did you start? What year was that when you like got into the C2C guys? Like when did they launch? 2019,
21, I guess.
Oh, it's 21.
No, they haven't been around. Them pumping. I don't know how long the actual format's been around itself, but them putting out content and kind of, I won't say mainstream because it's still pretty niche, but them putting out regular content and stuff. It's only been 2-3 years maybe, and I got hooked up with them through, like I said, through just searching content and stuff. And that was like my first year on Twitter. I just came across a YouTube video. I'm not sure who it even was, and they were talking about Twitter and all the content on there. And they said, just follow me on there, follow the people I follow. And then, so I did that, which was a nightmare because I just dove into following all these random people. I had no idea who they were. And then the first off season on there was just like, get me out of here. Like arguing about 4-string tight ends and all this. And I was just like, oh my God, I can't do this. And then once I found the C2C guys, I was like, oh, this is something I can get into the depths. And I kind of went from, like I said, I followed them and asked them questions, joined them, talked their Discord, whatever. I actually like beta tested the new website when they launched it because they're like, hey, you've been here forever. Like, tell us what you think of all the tools and all kind of stuff. But I kind of jumped right over Devy. Like, I don't even play in the standard Devy league, which sounds hilarious to say, but I'm super aggressive in C2C with the Devy aspect. So, but like I said on the Campus Life, and like Noah and I have talked about it, how like just the whole Devy thing's coming around full circle, where it's just an all-encompassing term for like NCAA prospects we see as having an NFL future. I don't know that the whole, like the standard Devy league, I don't know. It's just the depth of it. I kind of feel like if you're going to get in that deep where you're like want to get into Saturdays of watching football and whatever, like it's got to count for something. So I actually got a bunch of my home leagues in drafts this year. I did one with the Deverell Discord guys that we have are just finishing up, and I did one with a bunch of home league guys where we call them pipeline leagues. So the college side is Power 5 only and best ball. That way you got some skin in the game on Saturdays, and these guys are going to accumulate points for you and accrue value and everything else. And I think it's just a better way to bridge the gap and keep everyone engaged than having, like a standard Devy league is usually 5 rounds. So if you jump into that and you don't know what you're doing and you blow your draft and have 4 to 5 misses or something, you're just be like, oh, this isn't for me. Like there's nothing keeping me here.
Yeah. It's easy to do that too. Because if you're
ton of mistakes with like the player values and cross platform values and everything like that. Like we get in our Discord and TDR Discord gets it all the time, and guys who they dive in head first to this stuff, and then like they don't understand the value and the risk and the trading, like the risk that comes with trading established NFL guys for college guys, and it just everyone kind of they're like, I want to get deep into this, and they're gung ho with the college side, and then they just all of a sudden trading away valuable NFL assets for guys who are never going to sniff the league, and then that's how you get a bunch of orphans in your leagues. And it's difficult. It's difficult to find people to take over C2C and Debbie orphans.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about value, and I think guys do struggle with that because from what I see in most leagues, it's easy to get lost in like the campus side because it's so new to everyone and they just want all the new prospects, like everyone that is coming up and they're hyped up, and like you're going to trade. I've seen people trade Mahomes for even just Caleb Williams plus, and that's fine. But like, we know Caleb Williams is stud, but like, it's still like, what would you add to Caleb Williams for Mahomes if you're going to do that?
It's still got to be a boatload. Like, people don't understand.
This dude added like a Devi second, It was
because everyone's like, okay, he's the next guy. He's the next guy that we think is going to do something. We also thought DJU and Spencer Rattler and all these guys, like, obviously the closer they get to the league, we hope some of that goes away. But like last year, everyone was gung ho about Kayshon Boutte, who is my guy that I keep pumping up in Dynasty now, but that's at a 16th, 17th round cost. I'm saying buy him now because there's nothing bad can happen from him. He gets cut or whatever, doesn't make the team or fizzles out. It's nothing. Last year, you saw guys taking him in the first round of Debbie and C2C drafts. You've seen guys trading established NFL players for him, and now a 6th round NFL draft pick later, you're like, what did I do? Like, even if it was a guy who you're like a DJ Moore type guy or an Amari Cooper or someone who's not an upper echelon receiver, you're thinking, oh, I'm going to get ahead of the game here. I'm going to trade him for Boutte. I got the next stud coming up into the draft. He's a lock for a first round pick if he's back healthy, and all of a sudden you're like, oof, I just gave away a mid wide receiver 2, back end wide receiver 1 for nothing. Like,
yeah, and I mean I wouldn't even fault people for that move, to be honest, because if you're looking at like a DJ Moore or like somebody that's stuck in their value, and we know who he is, like obviously DJ Moore just got traded, so that changes it a little bit, but like overvalued assets on that side when you see Boutte coming up, but like nobody ever saw the downfall of him. Like that's what's scary about this is like these guys can just like plummet, they could just like go so far down in value. I would have never expected that from Boutte, like at all. But
no, and the layers just build up. Like there's from high school, like the odds of being even a top end high school recruit to being an impactful college player is the first big step, and then to be an impact college player, to get recognition, to get a draft pick, and then to get drafted, and there's layers, there's stops, there's places to get off along the way. Every place when they increase in value, and it's a guessing game. Sometimes you sell for less than they're going to be sealing out as. You never know. Like even like Zach Wilson. Like Zach Wilson was I don't even know what round he was going in drafts. You'd never know. And he came out of nowhere, and then he went 2nd overall in the draft. You're like, ooh, look at this! I got this guy out of nowhere. It's like a lottery ticket. And then you hold, and then now he's not. Same as Trey Lance. Same, like it just happens. There's no way to know unless you're even, I would say, an NFL scout, but they don't know either because that's how these guys got taken 2nd and 3rd overall, right? So I have that with. Well, I traded him a long time ago, but I had that with, like, say, Anthony Richardson. I got him in like the 19th or 20th round of the first C2C startup I had. Had I held him the whole time, I would have turned that into the 4th overall pick. And then so all those guys who have him now you're sitting on that. Now you have that question mark. You're like, do I hold him and see if he's Justin Fields like at the NFL level or better for fantasy, or do I get off this train now before it crashes? It comes to a screeching halt.
Yeah, and that's the most difficult part of assessing these prospects. And before we kind of get into that, should we do the TV show with Todd? I have a couple guesses on Todd's favorite TV show.
I was just gonna skim past it, Todd. If you want to tell us what your favorite TV show is, though.
Yeah, I want to know your favorite TV show.
I was going to ask about this. Like, do you guys not ask this ahead of time?
Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Honestly, with you, I figured we could just vibe the whole time anyway. We're just gonna talk, and we'd a little less structured in most of our.
No, I mean the TV show. Did you not ask the TV show ahead of time? How do you guys know all these characters from all these TV shows?
Sometimes. I mean, we're
watch
both dads, man. We watch a lot of TV.
Watch a lot of TV, yeah.
Yeah. I especially during COVID, I probably watched every show that you probably. I'm not so up on newer shows, but like, yeah, during that year, I was sitting there collecting unemployment checks and watching TV, man. So,
well, are we dropping a letter, Kenny, or like a Trailer Park Boys or something?
No.
Or
this is stereotype, man. It's worse. What is?
Don't even tell me come on. What are you going to hit us with?
I
just want to know.
This one's easy because I've watched the series probably 3 times myself, and the new one just came on. And I was going to say Justified.
Oh, I've never saw it, so that's.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now. When you get to be my age, you're going to listen to country music and you're going to watch Western. So it's just a rite of passage. It's going to happen.
I don't think you're going to automatically go to country music at a certain age. Like, I don't think that's just like.
Take this life advice from me. Yeah.
I don't think so, man.
I don't mind. Yeah, I don't mind that. Yeah.
There's some country out there that I'll listen to, but I don't think it's like something I'm going to get into with my age. I think it is what it is, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, Todd. I feel like you're like 5 years older than me. I don't even know how old you are, but
it's older.
So right. Who's your character from that?
Did you watch Justified? Do you know the character?
I've seen some of them. So like the first one that like pops in my head is kind of, I think Dewey might actually be like a pretty good manager because he is kind of like, what?
Not Dewey. He's a dumbass.
I think he does enough like behind the scenes that he might be able to be like a decent one. I don't want to say like Givens, like that's like
I would have said I think Art, like the chief deputy. I think he's the easy choice. And then I don't know if you haven't seen the whole series, I can't tell you the other one because you won't know what I'm talking about. So
what's Walton Goggins' character in that? I forget what his name is.
Yeah, that's Boyd.
There we go.
Boyd Crowder, yeah.
Phenomenal actor.
He's amazing.
He's great in absolutely everything that he does. So
yeah, he is.
One of really, really underrated one. But
he would be a good one too because he gets basically everyone else to do all his dirty work for him. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I would say probably your big advantage in C2C particularly is how in depth that you go into the freshman class. I would say definitively anybody that doesn't put their work behind a paywall, you absolutely have the most in-depth rankings of freshmen for C2C drafts coming in, and I think you have the most in-depth knowledge of it. When did you first start breaking down like this huddle tape of these freshman guys coming in, and could you talk a little bit about your process of how you evaluate these guys?
Yeah, so I guess like 2022 class would have been the first one I sat down and watched and kind of ranked them. I think I just did like mostly just the receivers.
Yep.
And I kind of did my top 20 receivers and kind of pinned them. And then this 23 class, I have my rankings pinned on Twitter right now. So just so people can go look at them and then just some kind of accountability through draft season and what they want to talk about. It's difficult, but I mean, most like the recruiting services do a really good job for us. Like they're the ones going, like they have scouts in the stands watching these kids like half a dozen times over their high school career and stuff. And it's interesting because like the C2C guys have had a couple of like 247 guys on for interviews and stuff, and they say themselves like you'll get the battles in the boardroom where the regional scouts are fighting for their kid to get bumped up in the rankings because they're watching them play 3 and 4 times, and then it's basically the national scouts who make the final decisions on their rankings with that intel and stuff. So yeah, like all the different recruiting services do a real good job of usually encompassing like the top guys, like say for receivers, like the guys that are going to matter inside that top 50, but the order that they're inside that top 50 it's scattered. It's crazy. Like I said, it depends who's the regional scouts and how much they're pumping for their guys to get up the ranking stuff. So, I mean, it's hard to find numbers on the guys, like verified testing and all that kind of stuff. So you really have no choice but to watch the tape and make distinctions from there. So it's difficult, but you're kind of like, it's kind of trial and error, but there's some of the stuff, like some of the tape is so bad that you're just like, I don't know what to make of this. But for the most part, you're just kind of looking, I'm kind of trying to look for traits that will carry over not only to college, but to the NFL. And it's hard to see like discernible traits that are, you project 4 years down the road, but it's what you're looking for. You're looking for guys' releases and their route running and their hands, and even just, especially with receivers, just their ability to say stack defenders once they beat a guy off the line, and you're looking at their versatility, where they're getting used, what kind of routes they're running. A lot of guys are catching bubble screens and that's their whole tape. And there's like not warning signs, but I try and stay away from guys who are only winning because of their athleticism at that level. It's usually a pretty big red flag down the road. And I mean, it seems weird to say I'm watching an 8-minute tape of this game, but I mean, I'm watching it 3, 4, 5 times, whichever, taking notes, going back, and I'll adjust them as I go along. But when you see kids that are, depending on the position, and you're watching and you're like, he's only successful because he's bigger, stronger, and faster than the guys he's playing against, it's a pretty big red flag. And it's not anything that they can do, but it's difficult for them to refine their crafts when they're playing against subpar competition. So you kind of get digging into that, where like, where's this kid go to school? What state's he from? What kind of program he's playing for? What kind of competition? What's their competition level? You can dig into their stats. Like Max Preps has stats for these kids and stuff, but it's all crowdsourced. Like they're basically just asking for box scores, and like, so it's like some 15-year-old kid doing community service or something, keeping track of stats for this. Like, it's not reliable. So that kind of stuff gets difficult. But the more you watch, the more you'll catch on, the more you'll put things together. Like advanced technical abilities for their position at that age is something that usually stands out. And like athleticism, it's difficult to gauge, but you're kind of looking for kind of a baseline athleticism to meet at like a certain threshold. After that, it's, you're not going to tell on by watching with your eyeballs that a kid's running a 4.3 or a 4.4 or whatever it is. You're just, a lot of it's in the open field. You're watching to see they're pulling away from the other kids on the other team, if they're erasing angles from defenders or whatever it is. Like, it's that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so when you're going through like this tape and stuff and you're checking for like these different traits and everything, are you assigning like a numerical value or like a grade, like he's got like A- hands or something, or are you just doing it mostly off of vibes? I guess more or less. Do you do something like that?
Yeah, I'll take notes and write down their strengths, weaknesses. I don't really assign a number grade, but I'll, stuff stands out one way or the other. Some guys are just like, I'm just indifferent to this. Like, I don't know anymore from watching this more than the guy who's watched them 6 and 7 times. I just rely, but I don't want to blindly rely on scouting ranks either, because
I mean, how much bias is going into these scouting rankings? Like how I'm just wondering how accurate these projections and this observation is, when these scouts are essentially assigned to these specific locations and these specific teams and stuff. Like, are we
from the services, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, it's the industry is super competitive, and those guys have their reputation to go on. That's it. So, like, if they're putting their name on the line and saying, like, beating the drum for this kid and be like, this kid should be a nationally ranked recruit, he should be this, I'm putting my reputation on, then, they're not trying to snowball anyone. That's all they have to go on. So
sure.
And there's only, like, if that's what you're doing for a profession, there's only, I want to say 4, but like ESPN stinks, so no one's doing it. Like, I could see with them, like, there's politics with like the camps and stuff. Like, Rivals is big on camps and getting the kids in there, which is good because that's where you're going to get your verified height, weight, whatever, some speed, whatever. And they do lots of drills, which is good. But ESPN kind of just, like, if you go back and look at their rank, it's just like, it's just wild. Like, they don't care. people are just going to them because it's ESPN, right? They've had their ESPN 300 for 20 years, but they're not reliable. So
sure, yeah. I mean, it's just kind of, it's still so foreign to me because you're like looking at some home videotape of a 17-year-old kid, and it just, I love to hear more about the whole process behind it. I honestly thought you were going in there and watching like 7-on-7s and stuff, and like going
I
to
do.
games and stuff.
I'll take in whatever content I can. Like OT7 they do a big national 7-on-7 tournament. So there's regionals, there's whatever for that. There's the Elite 11 for quarterbacks who they have like a pretty incredible track record for especially the Elite 11 MVPs and stuff who have come out the last 2 years. Rivals does their camps. There's all kinds of that stuff. And once you're into like I did it super early because I want to get my ranks down before there's outside influence and other people being like, oh, this is the kid you want to watch. And then you're like, oh, well, I've already gotten some flack for guys that I'm higher on than whatever, but I trust it. Like I've done pretty well the last couple of years doing it. So, and like I said, there's not a lot of people who are doing it. So, and like with the program, and I'm in another league called Cradle to Canton. It's the same deal. There's no supplement. Well, there is a supplemental draft, but the main supplement of your roster is recruiting. We in season recruit, which is super dorky, but it's what we do. So for our freshman class of like in a normal C2C, you'd have a 15-round freshman combined freshman supplemental draft. In the program, we do 15 up to 15 recruits. So it's like the NCAA video game. Like there's different categories to whatever your school has different strengths and whichever it is, and you get points for say the strength of your roster in the NFL, the strength of your college roster, the positions you're stronger at than other schools, all that kind of stuff. It's all kinds of crazy. And that's Nate from, I think he's with Dynasty Degens as well. He has a big spreadsheet formula. We just do. So anyways, so you're looking at these kids and you're scouting them and you're putting your points on each week and having these recruiting battles, and then by whichever way they randomize it and go by your points, and then you're awarded these kids as your recruits. Yeah. So you really have no choice but to at least look into them. I mean, some people don't do it as deep as they can, but it's the whole fun of it. So that's kind of where my big interest in comes into like the player evaluation process of it anyway. So
yeah. And the freshmen that Todd is ranked can be found on his Twitter page at Hobart_Whipple. It's pinned at the top of his page. One thing that, and I think we kind of glossed over it at the beginning, but you basically said that you sat there, consumed the content, tried to gain an understanding of the overall format before just diving headfirst into doing these drafts and trying to assess these players and stuff, which I don't think is particularly common in today's content creation. I think people just kind of fly by like the seat of their pants and just jump into whatever it is they think they could get a foothold in. So I think people should appreciate that aspect of your analysis because I think you've put in the homework, and I don't think that's something that's particularly common in the field. But you've kind of gotten me into like this whole C2C thing to where I truly think it's the best format, honestly, in fantasy football. And I saw like Jetpack Galileo was just doing one, so that's a guy with even more reach. So hopefully this format does grow a little bit. But your way of drafting in C2Cs is different from all the other content that I hear. Typically, a lot of people like to hammer like the college side of things and these college production guys early on because there's so many rounds that you could theoretically hit on some Devy guys later in the draft that they kind of want to try to double dip. You draft sort of the opposite to where you put more of an emphasis on the Devy guys early. Do you want to talk a little bit about how it is you attack like a campus side of drafts for those leagues?
Yeah, I'm super aggressive on the Devy side in the campus drafts, which I got some heat for last year. There's a couple other guys that do it too, and like the draft we did with the Discord guys was difficult because almost everyone did it that way. I don't know if it was because we talked about it a lot in the Discord and like they think that's what you're supposed to do, but there's no right or wrong way to do it. So the problem I found is like people getting into the C2C format, there's still some people who, and I get shit on for this because there's people saying, oh, I don't see this going on, but there's still to me people who are getting into the format and treating it like a dynasty league, like a typical dynasty league that's only going to last 3 years or whatever. So they're stacking up assets on one side or both sides to try and win both championships, which is fine. You pay your money, you play your league, do whatever. But it's a little disingenuous to me. Like, I get into the format thinking this is going to last forever. Like, whatever, as long as I'm playing fantasy, these leagues, I'm getting in with the intent of staying in them for the entire time. And the whole goal for me is to build up a pipeline of just the best NFL team I can build by bringing in these assets through the college side. So I attack it pretty heavy Devy side. And there's lots of reasons for it. Like, you can get college production anywhere, literally anywhere. Like, there's 133 teams. So, and it's multifaceted. Same as, like, if you look at it, like, the whole scope, it's kind of like a funnel. Like, you start, like, redraft down to best ball, the dynasty, to keeper leagues, whatever, down to Devy, and then C2C, and then CFF is at, like, the bottom, like the real Degens, or the true, like, you had Froton on a couple weeks ago, and you, like, just give him a question, and he's gone for 2.5 hours about, like, all these schools and their schemes and whatever else it is. But those guys, like, the further down you get, the less pushback there is on stuff. Like, those guys will disagree with each other on who they think is where or what. But a lot of the pure CFF production is coming from schemes. They're going from coaches. They want coaches and their schemes, and they want the guy who's going to be in that scheme at that leading that position. But when you're going off of the scheme and just trying to pick the guy, you're kind of leaving talent out of the whole evaluation. So you're just guessing at which guy is going. Like, sometimes it's known, and sometimes there's guys leading the way, and sometimes there's returning guys. But and that's the other thing. Those coaches are moving around all the time too. So all those coaches in the bottom tiers, they get successful, and then they move to another school, and then you're left with the guy in a new system that isn't nearly as productive. And so a lot of times, guessing on the guy who's going to be the guy in that system, the guys are available on waivers. Like, I've seen it every year for the last 3 years with mega guys like Charlie Jones last year at Purdue. Nobody drafted him. 0 people. He was on 0 radars. He was available in every draft or every waiver claim in every league they played. Same as Austin Reed. He was at Western Kentucky. He, like, lit the world up at quarterback. And by the time all the drafts were this time last year, Jared Doege was the guy there at the West Virginia transfer. He was supposed to be the lead quarterback, and then everyone drafted him. Everyone's drafts were over. They got into camp, and he transferred again. He was a grad transfer, and then everyone just picked up Austin Reed off him. So, if I go Devy heavy guys in my approach, I'm not going to be right on all of them, obviously, or I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you guys because I'd have a job evaluating these guys. But if I'm confident in my evaluations and the process and going through it, I'm taking these guys that I think have a chance to play further on down the road, have a chance to have these big increases in value, and then I can decide what to do with them then. I can decide to hold them. I can do whatever. And if you miss, whatever, you're going to miss. But guys are going to miss on CFF guys too. And the CFF guys run all the same risks as a Devy guy, except there's no upside to it. Their upside is limited to only production. Like, those guys, you miss on them. Those guys get hurt. Those guys transfer, which is huge now. The transfer portal, you see all these guys that were like 3rd, 4th, whatever, 5th round picks while they're still 5-star kids, Devy kids on the board. And then they're transferring up into a Power 5 school, and they're just a role player. And it's going to happen all the time because these kids you don't know what their intent is, or if they think, I'm playing at Toledo and then I get offered a scholarship to go play at Pitt or Penn State. I'm going to go where A, someone's going to notice me more, or B, like, some of them know that, their education is more important than football down the road because the chances of them making it are so slim that they can take advantage of it now, and then you're left with a middling guy on your roster, and his value's gone. And even the guys who do hit, like, you got to remember in your college season, the fantasy season's only 10 weeks long. So even the guys that do hit, sometimes it takes a couple weeks to know who they are. They're either you draft them or they're waiver guys. You've got like a 5 to 6 week window where they're putting up points for you, and you don't know if you're a contender or not. And then those guys, if they're seniors or graduating players, they're all getting sold for peanuts at the end of the season because nobody thinks they have any long-term value.
Yeah, I think you hit on something really important there too, where you were talking about the overall upside of taking these Devi guys that can give you value in college, sure, of course, but I think they have an exponentially higher ceiling that you can not only get their production for college, but you could double dip and get their production as an NFL asset as well. So kind of treating it like a pipeline, in a way when you're talking about your other league that you were doing with just Power 5 schools as opposed to all of college football. But I just think that's the way that makes more sense for me, like as a drafter. Like if I'm going to invest such high draft capital in a player, I don't want the guy to be like a 1-year rental or like 2 years like tops, and then I don't know what to expect from him. Like you said, I'm not going to hit on all of them, sure, like nobody's going to, but I want the upside, the potential of being able to potentially roster this guy for like a decade if I want to. Like if the guy is good and makes it to the NFL and gets the draft capital that we anticipate. I just think there's a lot more reward to making that pick as opposed to drafting like a Malachi Corley or an Austin Reed like you were just talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did an article with touching on this there, and I put guys like, I don't know, there's probably 6 or 8 guys, and those are just out of the last 2 years of my own personal drafts that I've hit on guys that were like I got Sturdivant in the 30th round of the first draft I did. I had Anthony Richardson I mentioned earlier. Michael Penix was in the 20-something round. Last year I had like a run of like Trevor Etienne, Katron Allen, and someone else in the 19th, 20th, and 21st round of the same draft, the same team. So like when you hit on those guys, even if you're only hitting on 30% of them, the value gain you get is massive. So those guys are all going like 15 rounds higher this year. So even if I don't buy into their long-term value, Debbie value, and project them to go to the next step and take the next step of being impactful on their NFL team, I still have not only the production they're going to give me in college, but the value that they've already increased. I can move off of them for something else.
Yeah. I know we briefly kind of touched on it with Greater 5 to Power 5 transfers. Do you think in the NIL era that we're going to see more and more of these kids going from Greater 5 to Power 5? And do you think over time you'll feel more comfortable drafting a guy going from the Greater 5 to the Power 5, or do you think it's always going to be you're going to be skeptical about it and you kind of just have to see it play out before you feel any kind of comfort about taking a guy that has that situation?
Yeah, I'm generally like a do not draft. Usually just a hard rule. I mean, there are exceptions, and guys like some guys like Juice Wells at South Carolina had a big year last year, but we never even saw him play at like the G5 level. He was like FCS. There's no way of knowing what those guys are doing, and they weren't draft eligible that year anyway. So those guys will sneak through, like the Trey Lances and stuff. Those guys they're not even eligible to play in the league, so they come up in the rookie draft every once in a while. But for the most part, the other guys it's just a hard stay away until they prove otherwise. We've seen it like too many times, and those guys, like I thought, those guys were guys that were huge producers last year, and then they get to the Power 5 level, and it was like Carson Steele was massive last year at Ball State. He might have been the highest scoring running back in the country for CFF. Then he transfers to UCLA, and then they're talking about him not even starting there. It's just like this.
TJ Harden. Yeah.
So what do you do? Like you can't, now you're sunk, right? You can't get out of them because you're not going to sell him at this cost or at this value. And then if he's a role player or a backup or whatever else, you're just all that value is gone. And those guys go high, like Rasheen Ali last year was going super high. And then like you see those guys go, once they're still going in the 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds of startup drafts because people are like, well, this guy's the far and away best CFF running back, and then lock him away. And then just see what happened. He got hurt last year. And then Kalen LeBourne, who's his teammate at Marshall, was on the waiver wire, and he put up a bunch of huge numbers too. So you're like, well, then you're kind of like, oh, this guy's a system guy, and I know that now, and I sunk a third or fourth round pick in him. So you're already kind of looking at the future, like, what do I got here? And there's those guys every year. Like Lou Nichols is one of those guys. The same thing. He was a third, fourth, fifth round guy. So if you go back and look at the drafts, I mean, you could see like it just to me, I can't take one of those guys at that spot when they're still like a fourth, fifth, or a 4 or 5 star kid like on the board, and it happens all the time. And like even with like the lesser Debbie prospects, it happens a lot too. Like we've had that in the Discord where people ask this question and they're like, oh, I'm like, oh, well, this is the guy I would target here. And then someone's like, oh, I just don't feel comfortable taking him. He hasn't played yet. I feel more comfortable taking a guy who's I've seen something from. Like, well, if that's your approach, then it's probably not the format for you, because you can't wait to see what these guys do because their whole value goes. Like a couple of years ago, and that's another thing. Not even CFF only guys, but people tend to value guys who are closer to being in the league, like in their draft year. The lesser prospects, they value those guys higher than incoming freshmen because there's a perceived safety that they're closer to being drafted, so they're closer to the league, so they're closer to returning value to my NFL team. And we saw that a couple years ago, guys like Raheem Jarrett and Parker Washington are getting picked ahead of like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka. It happened routinely because people are like, well, I've seen this guy play for 2 years, and he's the wide receiver 5 in the class going into the year, and there's some safety with that. Like, well, there's perceived safety, and that perceived safety turned into nothing when they're going the 6th round or undrafted in the NFL. Like,
yeah. So this is a Dynasty podcast primarily, so I think our listeners have heard a lot about Dynasty trading and how to assess value and where to get value on the Dynasty side of things or the Canton side in a C2C league. How do you go about assessing trade targets on the campus side of things, and where do you ultimately believe that you find the most value to trade when you're trading campus assets? What do you think?
A lot of the campus trades are straight campus side. Lots of people trade straight campus side assets for one another. They'll do 2-for-1 trades or whatever the case may be. Cross-platform trade, like cross-format trading with NFL and C2C is super difficult to gauge. Even people who play for a long time, it's because the risk is all on one side. I've tried telling people that in the Discord when they ask, and like the golden rule, Debbie or C2C, is not to trade established NFL producers for only college assets. You always want to, whether you're tearing down, whatever the case may be, you always want to get something back that's an NFL asset, and then take the risk on the college side. And some people that are new to it think they're getting taken advantage of too, because I've had that too, where like something goofy a couple years ago in the leagues, guy wanted Allen Robinson from me. It was Allen Robinson's last good year. He was still producing, and I asked for 2 younger Debbie assets, and I'm like, well, those guys are both top 15 receivers in their class. There's no way I'm getting ripped off. Well, 2 years down the road, Allen Robinson's dust now. But besides that, the 2 guys on the college side didn't do a damn thing. They're both dead assets on the college side. But this guy, I thought I was taking advantage of him because, well, these are 2 top-tier guys. Well, the hit rates are so bad. That's why I advise against taking guys. Like, even if you're trading, I don't know, it's difficult to gauge. But if you're trading, say, like a mid-tier quarterback for a freshman quarterback, whatever, you still want to get a lower-tier guy back. Like, even if you get, like if you're trading, say, like Daniel Jones. Say, I'm going to offer you Daniel Jones. I want, like, a Dante Moore or something you have on the other side. Well, people view Dante Moore as like the best quarterback or top 2 in this super loaded class, but there's no way you can trade Daniel Jones, an established NFL quarterback, with, you're thinking 4, 5, 6 years left of solid production, for a freshman who's never taken a step. So you've got to tear down. You got to at least get back like a a middling like a Kenny Pickett or even lower like a I don't want to say Garoppolo, someone along those lines, Tannehill maybe. You want to get someone at least you can start in the meantime in a year or two to take on the risk of taking on a freshman who hasn't played yet. So, but it goes both ways. Like if you find people, like I'll advise people who are listening to this or our Discord guys or not to take that trade. But if you can find someone else that will take on all the risk, by all means do it. Trade. I don't want to say give away guys, but if you get two guys that like maybe these guys are sophomores, I don't know what they're coming down the road. Take the risk, put it on their end, and take an NFL set. I had one with the first trade I ever made in C2C. Ended up working out for both of us, but it was a huge risk at the time. I traded right after our startup. I traded Anthony Richardson, who I drafted in the 19th round, and Jahmyr Gibbs, and I think a supplemental third or something like that for Justin Fields after he got drafted in the first round of the Bears. So I asked like the guys at C2C, I asked people who played. I'm like, this is the offer. What are they thinking? And everyone's like, yeah, you smash that side. Justin Fields is a known commodity. You just got drafted 10th overall in the NFL draft. Like you take that all day long. Now down the road, 2 years, the other guy, it's a really solid return. Like you wouldn't make that trade now. There's no way you're getting Anthony Richardson and Gibbs for Justin Fields now, but that's 2 years down the road with them knowing they both got top 12 NFL draft capital. But that's a win. That's a rare thing where that's a win on both sides. That could easily turn terrible giving away a rookie quarterback.
I feel like everyone really struggles with that, with the whole cross-platform trading, and yeah, I've always told people that that's exactly what you need to do because these guys, regardless of how highly touted they are, can easily blow up in your face. And I think another question that I get a lot is, when do you think you're selling high on the campus side as far as players go? Like when you have an Anthony Richardson, for instance, like when are you going to pull the trigger on, like you sold Anthony Richardson, right? At some point in a C2C league, when did you think that was a proper time to sell? Like if you are going to sell out on an asset, how do you judge that? Like if you're going to if you have an Anthony Richardson and a CJ Stroud or whatever, and they're both coming up, like you want to sell one or the other. How do you make that decision before they even get drafted? Like way before even that process comes around. Like if they're like in their junior year, if they're in their sophomore year or something like that, and you see them coming up. Like where did you have Anthony Richardson like 2 years ago? Like, where did you think
he hadn't even played a snap yet, and this other guy was willing to make that trade. So you have to do it then. It's no question at that point. Even this year, there was probably lots of people that were selling Anthony Richardson leading up in the draft process when he started to get that talk, and it's just all risk aversion, right? You have no idea. Like look at Will Levis. Will Levis was a betting favorite to go number 2 overall, like the 2 or 3 days before the draft. Like you should have got off that train then, which is easy to say now, but lots of people were doubting it then too. But those guys it's just risk aversion, right? You like hold on to them. If you went number 2 overall, then all of a sudden it's all money, right? It depends. It depends on your risk aversion. It depends. Lots of people are like sunk cost fallacy, right? Some people are like, oh, I got this guy for nothing. Now he's worth this. I'll just hold on to it. It's a lottery ticket. I got him for free. Well, like, yeah, you haven't checked the numbers yet. You got a lottery ticket.
I did that.
Numbers yet, so.
I did it a couple of times. I sold Anthony Richardson because I had gotten him so late in drafts where I was like, oh, like I can easily just move him off and, get this and that. Like I traded him. I ended up trading him for, I want to say I went back. I got Dante Moore and I can't remember the other pieces, like ancillary pieces, but it was like, oh, I'm going to easily just bank on this because he's going to come up and not even get drafted. I didn't think he was going to get drafted in the first round. Like I was like, oh, it's going to be easy money. So I've been wrong many times, and it is a guessing game. And I'm wondering, from somebody that's more experienced on that side, if there is a true way to you know, have a system down, but it just sounds like it's really like, you know, you feel good about it, sell it. You know, it's a flip of a coin when it comes down to it.
It's the same. It's the same as in Dynasty, and there's guys who do that too. There's some guys who are like automatically churn guys as soon as they get that increase in value and they bump up. They're like, "Oop, I'll take what I can get. I'll take an equal player and a plus if I see this guy is," and they'll just keep doing that. They'll just keep rolling it, just keep churning assets and churning assets. It's just how you play the game.
Yeah, and in Dynasty, I at least have more of an idea. At least I think I have more of an idea. My process is a little more refined, and the whole trading campus for Canton guys, like I think I have an idea, but it's also I can look back on some trades and they just do not look good at all.
Yeah,
so it's very hard even for guys that have been doing it for a while. So that question is tough.
There's even like some guy and like Dane Key, for instance, at Kentucky. He was a guy that was off everyone's radar, and then fall camp came around, and they just kept talking about him and talking about him and talking about him. So I scooped him up on waivers. I drafted him late, like 45th round, a couple places, and then he had an all right freshman season, which is if you're an analytics guy, freshman season does not matter whatsoever. It's impossible to get any kind of correlation between a freshman season and long-term success. They just don't matter, besides hitting very, very minimal thresholds. So he's a guy I had a bunch of, and he's a guy I traded a lot of because I don't view him as a long-term difference maker in the NFL. If he gets there in the first, I think he's probably a day 3 NFL pick, and he's not like an archetype of guy that I really love. He's like a Jalen Tolbert type of guy. He's kind of a big field stretcher type of dude that's never going to get enough volume to matter. Just an opinion,
man.
Whatever.
Jalen Tolbert is getting a lot of hype right now. I see him all over the timeline. I saw him all over the timeline today.
I remember saying last year that Rashee Rice was going to be this year's Jalen Tolbert, and it's true. And people are doing that too. But there's another example of a guy like Rashee Rice is a big time CFF producer. And every once in a while, those guys stumble into draft capital. And then this is where you make that decision. You're like, do I get off this train now and take the points I got with them on the college side and get an asset going forward? Or do I just keep holding on and hope that he manages to find some kind of value in that Kansas City offense? But Danke is a guy he was thrown in trades. He's a guy I added in trades. He was just people got hyped because he had a few 100 yards as a freshman, and they're like, "Oh, this guy could be the next big thing." And people get up and they're just like, "See ya, add him in."
What was your stance on Sky Moore last year? Like, as far as where did you have him coming in? Like, did you think he was going to be a producer in the NFL, or did you think he was going to be the biggest sell in the world after landing in Kansas City? After watching him in college.
I was kind of in between on him. I actually had him in the Anthony Richardson draft. I drafted him like the 24th round or something that year. But I traded him for like a nobody running back on the college side because I didn't see him as an NFL producer. And that was before he got any kind of hype, he was just like, the reason I had him was because his quarterback, Caleb Ellaby, was getting draft buzz preseason that year because he had a bunch of like advanced metrics that were all off the charts, whatever, playing at Western Michigan. And that didn't happen. I actually drafted him earlier, so I drafted Sky Moore to have the stack, and then I traded Sky Moore for nothing, and then he ended up getting second round draft capital.
Caleb Ellaby selling insurance now somewhere in the Rust Belt area.
Maybe
he's in the XFL or USFL or whatever. I think he played last.
Yeah, but probably still supplementing by selling insurance or doing something else. Yeah.
You said you wrote down some trades from other C2C leagues and stuff that
I went down a few. So the one big one I made in the program last year. In the program last year, I started off my draft with JSN and Josh Downs off the hop. So I ended up getting I think I had 1.6 points combined between them for the first 3 weeks because the JSN handed me, and it came from JSN, funny enough, because North Carolina played week 0, which doesn't count. And then Josh Downs tweaked something and sat out. And then UNC had their bye week, the 3rd week. So I got 0 points from him. And so in a 10-week season, 2 weeks into this, I got nothing from my top 2 guys. So I was behind the 8 ball already. But my NFL team was pretty good. So I ended up trading JSN, Brandon Innes, who I recruited, and Deuce Robinson, who I also recruited, for Chris Godwin and Zachariah Branch. So that was a fun one because it was not only cross-platform, but had recruits involved in it too, so guys who never even played for us. So it's pretty fun. But that's one of those things you gauge. Like, obviously, JSN's value is higher than Chris Godwin's now, but we still don't know when he's going to be in the league. He's still got a ways to go before he puts up Chris Godwin numbers. And, I had like a championship caliber team in the NFL side. So those are ones you got to eat. Like, the whole goal is to win at some point. So sometimes you just got to eat those and go on. Another one I traded.
You're a big Chris Godwin guy.
I am a big Chris Godwin guy, yeah.
You're a big Chris Godwin guy. So I doesn't surprise me that you would. Sorry, go ahead.
16-team league last year, I traded Calvin Ridley, who I drafted in like the 11th round of a 16-team league, knowing he wasn't going to play. Elijah Moore, Sky Moore, and Dane Key for DK Metcalf and Garoppolo. So 16-team league, and super flex, so your quarterback's obviously getting a boost. Metcalf is still top 15 dynasty receiver. So I gave up 0, absolutely 0, because Dane Key, even though he was doing okay in college side, he's still not a weekly starter on your CFF side. So all he's doing is accruing value or perceived value. And the other guys were doing nothing. You weren't starting Sky Moore, Elijah Moore, and obviously Ridley was out all year. So in a 16-team league that I was, I think, undefeated in, I got a top 15 dynasty receiver and another quarterback to play.
Nice.
So that was one. And then the last man I made, Dane Key again. I traded Dane Key and Brady Drogosh, who's an incoming freshman quarterback at Cincinnati, for Jason McClellan. So that one, I'll take Jason McClellan, my guy. So I'll take that one all day for, I'm assuming, he should be the top running back at Alabama this year. Should be in line for, top 15 to 20 CFF season at running back. And I'm hoping a day 2 draft pick for, again, Dane Key, who I'm not super high on long term, and then a kid who hasn't played a snap at quarterback at Cincinnati.
That team's got to be fed up with Jason McClellan to make that trade. I don't see what the upside of trading Jason McClellan for that package is, honestly.
I don't either. But at the same point, if you're in a league like the program, and depending on how this guy took over an orphan too. So to be fair, depending on how the draft went last year, and then we're recruiting, so supplemental draft isn't even the same. You got to have someone play quarterback. So
yeah,
if you're playing in a league with a bunch of pretty sharp guys and you didn't get to draft your own team, even, you got to take a chance somewhere. And like Brady Drogosh, those type of guys are guys I'm kind of targeted in supplemental drafts and stuff, because the quarterbacks, like this quarterback class is stacked, the 23 class, and they go super high. But there's like a weird thing where like you don't know after those guys, and even with those guys, you'll see you don't think of it now, but you'll see it down the road. Like those 5 guys there's no way those top 5 guys are all going to hit and be top 5 studs. It'd be like a historic NFL draft class in 3 years. Like the odds against that are so terrible. At some point, you got to go and get guys that have some kind of upside, NFL upside, which is tough to gauge with quarterbacks, and are unlikely to get recruited over at the school they're going to. So Drogosh was a guy that I think on 3 was a lot higher on than 247 last year. I think he was a top 8 quarterback or something for them. So Cincinnati's not going to recruit another quarterback, another 4 or 5-star quarterback to play over him. So he should get kind of handed the job. But even in supplementals, I've kind of done that. Even not top tier guys, but I've kind of targeted those guys who are already established early on as starters at a school that aren't going to get recruited over. And then at least you're going to get those 2+ years of CFF production and just hope for the best. And the quarterback, that's why I advise for Devy players enough to avoid quarterbacks. Quarterbacks and tight ends, just don't draft them early in straight Devy leagues. And then I try and kind of avoid them in C2C startups and supplementals even too. Like last year, I got Bo Nix in the 28th round of the 16-team draft. Bo Nix was going in supplementals or in waivers everywhere, and Riley Leonard. Like quarterback is so damn hard to evaluate, and these guys come out of nowhere all the time. And teams and executives and scouts, they fall in love with tools. Like there's tools, and they think they can mold these guys. And every time it starts to dissipate, you get a guy like Josh Allen who is just super raw with his big arm and everything worked out for him. All of a sudden that resets it. You got another 5 years of taking these tools guys because everyone thinks they're going to turn Will Levis into Josh Allen, and it's a crapshoot. And you got 133 teams, and like in college side, there's so many bye weeks too. You have to have like your 45-man roster. You probably have like 8 quarterbacks, probably 5 or 6 of them you're hoping are like regular starters every week, and a couple developmental guys. And like out of all those guys, you're only going to get 2 or 3 that matter each draft cycle. And you see with quarterbacks, especially, quarterbacks is where those 4th, 5th, and even 6th-year guys just pop up, like the Pickett's, and you're going to see it with Bo Nix, and Michael Penix is another guy that you're talking about this year, and like those guys are getting first-round draft buzz, and they were thought like dead to rights. Like Campus Life also was talking about the other day on where they said like if you timed out in the draft, the big joke was we're giving you Bo Nix. If you time out in the draft, you're getting Bo Nix on your team because he was an afterthought for 3 years. Then all of a sudden he goes to Oregon. Pac-12.
Yeah, where did he go in our draft?
The 108, I believe.
Yeah, like
it was.
108.
Yeah, I think it was in the first round. Yeah,
and like that's the whole format. The format is so unpredictable that everyone's like, "Oh, what is that?" Like, well, it sounds bad, but he's getting probably a top 3 CFF quarterback and a guy that's getting first round draft buzz. If 8 months from now or 9 months from now he gets drafted in the 13th overall or 18th overall or whatever it is, you look back, that's a home run. That's a no-brainer, that draft pick. It's just nobody knows. You never know.
Yeah.
That's what I was talking about on the trade portal one that we did when we were talking about this. I said like all these people are pumping Aiden Childs at Oregon State. Everyone's like, this kid's going to be a CFF stud. He's a top 10 quarterback in this loaded class and whatever else is. And like, they got DJU. He's a 5-star kid that played at St. John Bosco, like a national powerhouse, and like was a standout freshman at Clemson. He was supposed to be the next big thing. There's just as good a chance or even better chance that he goes there, balls out because the Pac-12 defenses stink, and either recoups draft value or they win. Say they win 8 games. Say they go 8-4. Were they going to kick him out for a kid that's never taken a snap in college football? He's got another year of eligibility left. If he wants it, they're going to let him come back. And it would be smart for him to do it because next year's quarterback class is terrible by the looks of it. Like we got Drew Alar, like of the first year eligible guys, we got Drew Alar and then Cade Klubnik, Connor Wegman. Like that's not instilling like none of those guys are. There's never a lock for a first round pick, but none of those guys are guys that Alar's getting a lot of buzz and people would like his skill set, and so do I. He's my third-ranked quarterback. He's my third-ranked quarterback in C2C, and I don't have any shares. And I won't have any shares because I'll never draft quarterback where he's going. It's like if I'm drafting quarterback, it's Caleb or bust. I have one Caleb share. I drafted him 108 last year. And even then I felt sick about it because he hadn't even he played half the season. You're just like, oh, this is all tools and put my trust in Lincoln Riley.
Worked out for you so far, So
far, yeah. But we don't know. We still don't know. Like if he fell flat on his face and busted in the NFL, you'd be like, it happens.
That's kind of the theme with C2C. We don't know. Like when it comes down to it.
It's a ton of unknowns. And then it's weighing the knowns versus the unknowns. Just like with Marvin Harrison Jr., like no one thinks he's gonna bust. I've already said he's the wide receiver 3 in Dynasty. That's where I would take him. I just did my foundational rankings the other day where I integrated my top 50 Debbie guys into Dynasty. That's where I have them. I have them ahead of CD Lamb. And it sounds crazy. And it could be. A year from now, you're like, that guy's an idiot. What was he doing? Well, what were you thinking? But if you don't, you're never getting them. So
yeah, and he could easily do that. Or he could be like a Jerry Jeudy, you know?
Exactly. Jerry Jeudy was supposed to be a generational.
Everyone had Jerry Jeudy next to Michael Thomas or whoever the hell was the top Dynasty wideout that year. So he was up there. I think everyone said that Jeudy was going to come in and be the wide receiver 3 or 4 of Dynasty.
People still are. People love Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, I think he's great. I like his.
Nobody likes him.
I would say
or you're tired of listening about it.
This is definitely. What did JC say? A Jeudy podcast? I think we said we're a Jeudy podcast.
I like Jeudy. Yeah, I like Jeudy. I've kind of given up on the hope that he'll be like a top 12 guy. Like, I just don't know if that's ever going to be the case anymore. But I think he's still like plenty talented. You know, I still think he's.
It sure is. Yeah, there's lots of guys that are plenty talented that are wide receiver too.
Yeah, Jerry Jeudy is in like the DJ Moore range of player for me. Yeah, I know. We talked about DJ Moore a lot this week.
DJ Moore. Don't start. He just housed one screen pass in a preseason game. All of a sudden, he's in the Hall of Fame.
Hey, man. It was the most action that I've seen from DJ Moore in the last.
I got shit for that on Twitter too. When I said a Chicago Bears quarterback has never passed for 4,000 yards, and it was like, oh, no one else has done it, so Justin Fields can't do it. It's 85 years of history, man. It's called the Windy City for a reason. Nobody has done it in the history of the team. And we're just writing them down for 4,200 yards this year.
Yeah, but I mean, that's Twitter, man. Like anything you say, there's going to be some pushback. Regardless of what kind of take it is, you could say it's Monday and there's going to be people that are like, it's Sunday here. So it just doesn't matter.
And he's a super talented player, but he is what he is. And we should know that by now.
Little American history for you. Chicago is actually called the Windy City because of the politicians that can never shut up and they always keep talking and stuff. So they call it the Windy City because of their lobbying, not because of the wind coming off of the waters out there.
It is a very windy city in general. So I mean, it works both ways.
Whatever the history of it, it's been 85 plus years and nobody's done it. So
it is such a long time. Who has the most like in one season? Is it Cutler?
It's Eric Kramer.
Oh jeez, it's not even Cutler.
No, it's like I think it's Eric Kramer has like 3,850 yards or something like that.
Yikes!
Every time I talk, my Siri comes up on my computer. I don't know how to turn it off. So it's been cutting me off the entire podcast where it like comes up and it's like, what can I do for you? And you guys blank out and everything goes black and then it comes back. So.
And then even having that conversation, something that people were bringing up, well, look at Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown. Like they could be the same thing. Like, well, yeah, if you don't count the 2 games that Jalen Hurts sat and Minshew threw for like 600 and something yards in those 2 games. Close to 700 yards. AJ Brown had like 230 yards and 2 touchdowns or something in those games. Like we're just throwing that out the window. Like,
yeah, I'm not talking about DJ Moore here. So I'm not, you're trying to fish for it. I'm not sure, but I'm not going there right now.
You want to talk Lorenzo Styles instead?
I like Lorenzo. That's another thing.
I have him on a team.
Dude, I love his skill set. I feel like
I got duped. And I was just looking at it yesterday or this morning, I think. So I did a new article for Impact Freshman. So I had Jane Greathouse down. I was looking at last year's stats, and I want to say Styles was still like not. I think he might have led them in yards or was second. He was a close second in Notre Dame's receiving, and he's like, "I'm out of here. I'm going to play defense at Ohio State." Like, wow.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly what we talked about. Is they could easily, like a top tier asset, could just move over to another team and switch to defense.
Oh yeah, and I have him on the team, and I asked Brunin from C2C because he's got ins at Ohio State. I asked him like, "Hey Matt, any chance he's playing receiver before I drop him?" Because they had the same thing with Chip Trayanum. He was running back at Arizona State. He went to Ohio State to go back to playing linebacker, and then they got thin at linebacker or at running back, and they put him back to running back. It was like, if there's any chance he's going to play the slot for Ohio State, I'm keeping him. Like, oh, no, it's not happening. That's
Dude,
I
don't have inside information, but that's exactly my line of thinking is like an injury happens and they're just going to throw him over onto offense.
Totally possible.
They're like, oh, we have this guy on the team that can play really good wide receiver spot. So
it'd be hard to imagine Ohio State going and walking that wide receiver room, but I mean, his brother's a 5-star safety there, so that's why he went there.
Yeah,
that's another thing with the high school players is it's not uncommon at all for those guys to play offense and defense, right? They play, and it's actually something I look for. Like a lot of the wide receivers I tend to like, a lot of them are high end defensive backs too, and it just helps with their instincts and their advancement of knowing route trees, knowing like defender manipulation and what the offense is trying to do at the same time. Like Jordan Hudson, who I'm the leading Jordan Hudson fan club. He was a high end DB. JoJo Trader, who's like my number one receiver this year, he's a 5-star receiver, and people are talking about him being a better defensive back. Eugene Wilson's another guy. It's not uncommon, right? They want those guys, unless they play for like a national powerhouse, they're likely the best player on their entire squad. So they want to get them on the field. So Jerion Dickey was another one. He played safety a bunch. They just want that guy like, oh, this guy's the best athlete we have on the team. He's got the best ball skills. We'll just put him back there at safety or corner, let him play off ball, make plays. Doesn't even have to tackle anything he doesn't want to. Happens all the time. Or quarterback. A lot of guys that play smaller schools or smaller areas, they play quarterback because the quarterbacks are so bad that they can't get the ball to the guys. So they're just like, oh, play quarterback so you get the ball in your hands every time.
Yeah.
Like, you ever seen Allen Iverson's high school highlights of him playing quarterback? Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah, a lot of teams like the star like basketball player is the quarterback.
Yeah, well, they're the best athlete on the team. Like, if you think about it, the NFL, there's 133 Division I schools. There's 32 NFL teams. There's 10 good quarterbacks. The rest of them are dog water. So just imagine kids playing friggin' like the third level of high school in Missouri. Just imagine the caliber of quarterback player again. Like, some of them are just garbage. So that's the only option they have is like, this kid's the best player we got. So put him at quarterback. At least he touched the ball every time.
We're talking about Joshua Manning's huddle tape at that point.
Yeah.
That's what I saw when I was watching him, unfortunately. But yeah, I think this was a really good episode. We got to touch on a lot of the C2C strategy that we haven't gotten to touch on previously, and I think that you cover it a completely different way than most of the outlets that do talk C2C. So really awesome having you on. Do you have anything that you wanna plug or anything?
No, I don't think so. Like, just my written stuff's over at League Winners. It'll be on our site, obviously the Degen site, when we get going. So look forward to doing some of that. We got our rankings. I just did massive rankings, C2C rankings, Debbie rankings, Dynasty rankings. Did the foundational ones with my top 50 guys integrated, which is a super, super tedious exercise. I don't recommend it to anybody. It was super difficult, especially once you get past the top tier guys. Just that's another thing to look at when you're like trying to trade cross-platform and stuff. You're like, where would this guy rank if he's a hit? Like, you're not even considering the fact that he's not going to hit. You're like, even if he does hit, where does he go and where does he fit in the NFL? Where am I going to slot this guy in?
Yeah. Rankings are easily my least favorite thing to do.
Super
honestly, I don't enjoy doing them particularly. But
and the C2C rankings were a huge undertaking too. Like, yeah, it's hard to know where to draw the line. And yeah. I've come around on that too. Like, I talked to JC when we were doing our draft about it. Like, kind of come around on bucketing guys who are like good producing CFF guys at P5 schools that the league might end up liking more than I do, like more than I think they're going to at this point. It happens every year. Like, even guys like Xavier Hutchinson or a guy like that, he was a massive CFF guy for Iowa State. He went in like the 6th round. Like, but a lot of people were like, oh, he's a CFF only guy. So it's difficult. It is what it is. But some of those guys, there's always like Senior Bowl guys that are going to rise, and those type of guys that show up. Like Zay Flowers was a huge one last year. There was lots of people in Devi and C2C that were high on him, but I don't think to that extent. I don't think there's too many people that had him pegged as a first round wide receiver going into last year.
I didn't even have him pegged as a first round wide receiver, like up until the draft. Like I didn't up until like I think the last time I did my rookie rankings did I not put him up there. So I watched him in person a lot the last 2 years. So I knew that he was going to be special, but not somebody that would get first round draft capital. So that was definitely surprising on my end, but he looks good. I mean, I don't own one share of Zay Flowers in like the 20 something leagues I'm in. I might regret that, I think, at some point.
That's the other thing is like I said, you don't know when to get off the bus with these guys too. Like, and that's the one thing. Like Devi, all the big dynasty guys want to call people Devi darlings and talk about like Devi and C2C players holding out hope for these guys forever because they play on their teams in colleges. But I think that's pretty much the opposite. I think once you play Devi or especially C2C for a couple seasons and you get used to the hit rates and you see the difficulty of projecting these guys from 3, 4, 5 years out and not only making the league but making an impact at the league, I think those C2C managers have a better grasp of what guys are going to be something, what guys aren't, and when to get off that train. I don't see any Debbie guys hyping up Justin Ross on Twitter. So I said the other day, like expecting Justin Ross to be a significant fantasy producer at this point is like expecting Odell Beckham to put up Justin Jefferson type numbers this year. Like it's been 5 years. It's not happening.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think we're all there with you on Justin Ross. I really been trying to move him everywhere. Nobody's been helping my case, but I thought Twitter would give him a boost in value a little bit there, but yeah, didn't happen.
You have to play in leagues with those guys. There's guys that have whole accounts made up of imaginary trade values and stuff of leagues that don't exist. So they're on there every day. Like, oh, if you have this guy, you should be trading him for a second. And then they're like, oh, well, he scored a touchdown in preseason. I put up all my shares and not one taker. Like, well, if you think the guy's dog shit, why do you have so many shares of him in the first place? Like, get out of here.
That is the Brad Smith episode of the Dynasty Degens podcast. You can find all of Todd Vincent's work at the FF League Winners on our Dynasty Degens Discord and on his Twitter at Hobart_Whipple. Nerd, you have anything before we sign it off?
No, I mean, we did touch on the fact that we have the Devi Degens podcast dropping with Todd and Noah in a couple weeks. And then we have the website popping off a little bit there. Hopefully we have everything going with the changes in Discord, the website, a lot of new content coming out via the website by the end of the month is really the goal. Hopefully that does happen. And then next week we have, I believe, LQ on. So he's an analyst for the NFL Network. He's going to be on. We're going to be talking probably a lot of LA sports with him and then touch on a lot of good stuff. So excited about next week. But yeah, I think that's all I got going on. JC, anything on your end?
No, this is a really fun episode. I was really happy that Todd agreed to come out of his shell. He's done some podcasting now. He's going to do his own show. So I'll definitely be listening in every week for that too. So I need another show in my rotation. So I'm excited for that too. So thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Todd, thank you. And thanks for everybody listening. We'll see you next week.